Hello everyone, my name is Loco and welcome to another StarCraft 2 video. Now what I got for you today is a match that I played yesterday, and I have to be honest, I'm actually rather proud of this one. So this is a Protoss versus Protoss, and the thing about PvP is that it historically has always been one of my weakest matchups. So when I first started playing StarCraft 2 back in 2010, I basically started laddering in 1 versus 1 right from the get-go with Zerg. And for the first couple of years, I really didn't touch Terran and Protoss very much whatsoever. I played them every once in a while, but I was absolutely horrible. However, obviously, since then I've been doing a lot of live streaming, and obviously when you play on stream, it's pretty difficult to just simply say, okay guys, my games are going terrible, I'm gonna go ahead and do nothing for the next 30 minutes. So instead, I have started playing a lot of random whenever my Zerg games aren't going particularly well. Now obviously, for example, Zerg versus Protoss, right? I kind of know how to play the matchup from the Protoss point of view just because I play against them quite a lot when I play Zerg. And the same can be said for Zerg versus Terran as well. I kind of know how to play Terran in that matchup. However, for Protoss versus Terran, and then I guess Terran versus Protoss, and then PvP and TVT, usually I have just not been very good, only because the knowledge that I have mostly comes from casting a lot of games and from watching a lot of professional games as well. Anyways, so this is a game that I played yesterday. It's a Protoss versus Protoss, and my opponent in this game was a 5.9k Protoss player. To put that in perspective, I think on the European server right now, I know for a fact that he was ranked 124 in Grandmaster. I think in the North American ladder, you'd probably be like top 20. I'm not even no, I think he's probably like top 50 or so on NA, but regardless, this was a very, very high-level Protoss player that I went up against, and spoiler alert, I actually ended up winning this game. Now today, we're gonna have a look at this replay. We're gonna try and discuss what my mistakes were and what things I did correctly, and how I can improve in this matchup in the future once again. Now we're gonna be doing so by using the in-game tools, like for example the production and the timing, and just simply by noticing the difference between my strategy and his strategy, but also by using SC2 replay stats. Now shout out to SC2 replay stats for sponsoring this video. I've done a couple of videos with them in the past. Honestly, it's pretty much like a perfect sponsorship because of the fact that I actually use their tools even when I'm, not sponsored to go ahead and do so. So basically, SC2 Replay Stats is it's a tool that allows you to compare your games against people that are just a little bit better than you. So basically what we're gonna do is after about the first 4 minutes or so, we're gonna be jumping into the early game section on SC2 Replay Stats, and we're gonna compare my gameplay to the gameplay of the average Grandmaster level Protoss. So it's gonna show us the differences that I need to try and cover, I suppose, and the improvements that I really need to go ahead and make. Anyways, I've been rambling onwards for long enough, right? Almost told you my whole life story in the in the last couple of minutes. So here's the thing. Protoss versus Protoss, to me, I'm still not particularly good at it, even though I beat a very high-level player. Historically, it's always been a matchup that I found rather difficult, because in my game sense, I guess, it always kind of feels like I'm playing rock, paper, scissors in a way. Except that rock, paper, scissors are not rock, papers, and scissors. It's actually gonna be Twilight, Robotics, and Stargate. In the early game, you kind of have to decide which of the ones you want to go for. For example, Blink Stalker is great against Stargate. Stargate is great against Robo, and Robo is great against Blink Stalker. So you've got this interesting triangle of builds. However, with patch 4.0, we obviously had the addition of the shield battery, and it changed quite a bit. Basically, for example, you can really keep your mineral line alive against an Oracle really quite confidently by just simply having a single shield battery in there. And for the most part, I've started playing a lot of Stargate with Phoenixes in the last couple of games. And that's my thought process going into this match as well. So, my opponent, he's a Protoss player. I mean, there's 2 Protoss players present in this game. He's gonna go ahead and do something a little bit more aggressive. So here's the thing. I notice my opponent is putting up 2 pylons here right from the get-go. And I got a little bit confused by this, just because I didn't really see a lot of cannon rushes leading up to these games in the PvP matchup. I know that they are very, very common. I already have my double gateway going up right now, which is the quote-unquote like standard right now in Protoss versus Protoss. Basically, you go double gateway into a Cybercore and then, you know, maybe some Stalkers, maybe some other units as well. But I noticed my opponent is putting up 2 pylons here right from the get-go. And as we can see right here on the other side of the map, he decided to go ahead and put up a forge. Now, I feel like this is my first room for improvement. Let's look at this. For some reason, and I do this in very few of my games, I did not go for a worker scout. I start off this game by thinking my opponent might be cheesing, but not being fully aware of the fact that he is. And that sounds like a relatively minor difference. Right now I see the second probe, so I know for a fact that he is indeed cheesing. But the thing is, if I would have scouted with a probe early on, so maybe the one that I put down the first gateway with, right? If I would have scouted there right from the get-go and I would have seen the forge, I would have been able to react a lot more swiftly. Here, I am playing on the fly, and luckily for me, I've played a lot of Zerg, like I said. Feel very comfortable defending cannon rushes with Zerg. I've been cannon rushed more than I can count, so you know I've been having a lot of experience with that. And I start off basically by trying to patrol probes here and there just to make sure that it's difficult for him to go ahead and put up photon cannons. Now eventually he does still get a photon cannon up and running over here. I try to get a couple of probes on this one as well. Now I ended up killing the pylon over on that end as well, but I've already got one of my zealots now just about to finish up, and while I do obviously miss out on a lot of mining time, I know that my opponent is pretty much 100% all in here. Gotta continue killing as much as I can. There's really only one photon cannon here that we have to worry about. That's the one here near the southern part. I only had 2 probes hitting away at that, so that's a little bit unfortunate. It is gonna finish now, and it is indeed gonna get a couple of kills, but I do have that one zealot out, and that does make life, at the very least, reasonably manageable. So how much do I lose here in total? I think I lost 2 workers, and I ended up killing 1. So honestly, early game aggression has been deflected. Mostly because of the probe shenanigans here that I, you know, did with the patrol, make it difficult for him to really finish all of this up. Now this one pylon is not powering the gate over there, so I decide to go ahead and not spend any additional resources other than this one zealot on unit production, but instead put down the cybercore as well, because I would be very, very surprised if my opponent at this point in the game wants to continue the rush. Anyways, so we do have a rather aggressive opener here from my opponent, but let's have a look at how he follows this up. So, obviously I bought myself a lot of time. I lost a couple of workers, I lost quite a bit of mining time obviously as well, but I'm not in a terrible spot just because I've got a lot more tech than he does. So this is a situation that I have not really ever been in the Protoss versus Protoss matchup. How exactly do you capitalize on this? In retrospect, besides going for the probe scout, which I think would have been a really good option, I probably wanted to send these zealots straight across the map. I think if I would have sent these zealots straight across the map, and then also followed that up with 2 stalkers right when the cybercore finishes, I would have been able to deny this natural expansion. So my opponent, he knows that he's in trouble, and rather than just simply committing to a lot more, you know, defenses over here, he decides to take a risk and take the low ground expansion. I think if I would have sent the unit straight across the map, I think I would have won. There's no purpose in killing these zealots right now. I do get stalkers here anyway, so there's no reason why these zealots shouldn't be moving across. Now, obviously, I was a little worried that he was going to be able to continue onwards with his aggression by, for example, sending another probe across and then maybe following it up with, you know, another pylon inside of my main base. So instead, I decided to just simply play what I had initially planned. But I really feel like if I would have gone for the probe scout first, I would have been able to confirm that he was indeed transitioning out of this shenanigans. But just simply keeping that probe around, right? I would have been able to confirm what's going on, and then I would have probably been able to deny that natural expansion. So 1 probe scout, and then sending the zealots straight across the map would have definitely been very, very helpful. Now, SC2 replay stats splits up the game into 3 different segments. The first 4 minutes are considered the early game, so let's have a quick look at what the website has to say. Alrighty, so here we are. Now, there are 2 segments of SC2 replay stats that I want to have a look at. So first off, we've got this classic overview that basically gives me a lot of information about the game. For example, we can scroll over towards the, I guess, like the 3-minute mark. You can see that apparently my opponent hit a small little supply block. I had a couple here near the beginning, but that's just because I wasn't really mining very much. You can also point out exactly where supply blocks happen. So apparently, in about 20 seconds or so from now, I will actually be hitting a supply block. But I think an important thing to point out is that right around the time that he puts up the Nexus, which I think was right around like, I don't know, 3-ish minutes, I have 200 army value and it builds up to 550 army value. And my opponent has absolutely nothing for defense. This is a big deal. I 100% certainly could have actually prevented that expansion from ever starting up. There's also the heat map here. This will actually take a look at the entirety of the game. So you can see that there's going to be quite a little bit of action over here, or at the very least, it's going to be a spot where quite a few units will indeed end up dying. And we can have a look at my statistics as well as his. So there's a lot of different, details that you can pick up on over here. However, one of the things that I personally find really interesting is indeed the guided improvement, but more so the raw data points. So as far as the guided improvement goes for the first couple of minutes on the game. Now obviously we already saw, right, in that previous tab that there are quite a lot of supply blocks over here. So it's pointing out here that I need to keep working on keeping my supply block time down. Now, I didn't quite realize that it is indeed going to be a cannon rush, and it's very hard to go ahead and do so, but it does give you some helpful tips. Keeping your supply block time as low as possible is one of the most important things in the game. As a Protoss player, it's key to make sure you have pylons being produced in between warp-in cycles. What this means is that after or during a warp-in from your warp gates, you should be building at least one pylon. When you progress to the later stages of the game, around 70-ish supply, start building 2 or 3 pylons at once. Now, obviously, that's not going to teach us all too much, but one important thing that I think we can have a look at already is going to be the raw data point. So yeah, we can really see the difference that getting cheesed makes here, right? So I produced in the first 4 minutes, apparently that many workers here, and the average Grandmaster produces about 1.5 more. Now, the reason for that, obviously, is all of the lost mining time. But you can really see that my income here in general is significantly lower than it's supposed to be. Now, once again, that's because I got rushed and I was forced to pull these units off of resources. But there's no denying that I definitely could have worked on keeping that supply block time low. Now, it does say that the average Grandmaster League Protoss player in the PvP matchup apparently gets supply block for 22 seconds, or I guess close to 23. The main reason for that is just simply because of the fact that you want to do that. Some of the build orders in the early game are optimized to be maxed at supply for just a little bit and to technically be supply blocked. But that's all part of the saving up and you know, the part of the game where you basically want to make sure that you play as optimized as possible. But obviously in the mid and late game in particular, I'm very curious to see how I can go ahead and continue improving. Alright, so we left off at the point where my opponent was just about to finish up the Nexus, which I 100% certainly could have prevented from finishing in the first place. Right now, I finally start moving across the map, and I feel like I actually have another pretty grave error over here, which I did not realize while playing the game. I do not actually realize what it is that my opponent is having there, right? I see that he's got some buildings here on the low ground, but overall, I don't really see the amount of saturation that he has or how much he is committed to this shenanigans already. I also briefly contemplated running by here with these stalkers and trying to get into the main base. I think in the end, it's a good choice to not go ahead and do so, because it's definitely a bit of a risk. I do get the zealots, obviously, that I made from a little while ago. They're currently also moving across. I sent one over here to see if there's maybe any kind of additional proxies. One of the things that I realized by a lot of people that, you know, have cheesed me, after their first cheese fills, oftentimes they start cheesing again with something else. So I sent the Zealot right here on a bit of a loop around the right-hand side of the map to see if maybe it's like a proxy Stargate or maybe a Dark Shrine somewhere hidden inside of the Fog of War. Anyways, my follow-up at this point, and at the very least what I wanted to go ahead and do, was just simply play the game that I originally had planned. So in my case, that was indeed the Stargate play. I really wanted to go ahead and continue making Phoenixes because of the fact that I really like the way that they can lift up Immortals, so you can really deal a lot of damage against Immortal play, but you can also actually harass mineral lines quite nicely. It's a little awkward though when your opponent is playing that Twilight Council, so obviously at this point we already know that there is a Twilight Council up. I'm not entirely sure if that was the best of choices by me. Regardless, though, I do not realize, hey, wait a second, there's a shield battery, 3 stalkers. I've got 1 zealot and then also 3 stalkers of myself. Get that 1 Phoenix in right now as well. The Phoenix has not been spotted by my opponent yet, but I will be starting up that Nexus. Now, all this time, right, I'm flooding quite a little bit of resources. I have to be careful that I keep on macroing here. This is one of the things that I've been trying to work on quite a bit in the PvP matchup and basically all of the Protoss and Terran games. I've been trying to be a lot more active with the units that I've got because you really do get rewarded by doing so. I do decide to lift up one of these units, but that really did not achieve very much of anything. Now, the second Phoenix is coming up. I notice my opponent is being rather aggressive at these, so I can indeed go ahead and lift up one of these things as well. Now, let's have a look at what's going on in the meantime at home, right? Because this is all nice. I get indeed a kill right here. But you can see in the meantime, I am flooding 600-ish resources. That's way too much, guys. That is way too much. My gateways have not been morphed over to warp gates yet. I do not have my second Stargate going up until I already have a ton of resources. I really want to commit, by the way, to that heavy Phoenix style. But, well, once again, I'm pretty good at continuing the macro while I play Zerg. I really do feel like, overall, my macro here is not as good as it should be in these kind of scenarios. Now, I do get the Phoenixes inside of the main. As you can see, the shield battery is there, but Phoenixes deal so much damage that if you have a handful of them, you can still essentially one-shot probes by lifting them up quite comfortably. Now, one of the reasons why I just mentioned that I've been trying to play a lot more aggressively is because of the fact that I've been dying to like pretty random pushes. For example, on paper my opponent could probably just go for Blink Stalker, 8 gateways, 2 bases, 3 gases, and then like a maybe like a pylon on the other side of the map to just simply warping units with, and then he could probably deal a lot of damage to this build. However, the strength of these kind of openers, and in particular Phoenixes are quite notorious for that, is that you can really be continuously active on your opponent's side of the map and make it doable to just simply continue forcing your opponent to stay at home. So if you are active with your army, obviously, it's pretty good to go ahead and obviously move all over the map. But in reality, obviously, it forces your opponent to stay home, but you have to be on point with your macro. Once again, I've got these cycles where I try to produce. So right at this point, basically my strategy is to go for a lot of Phoenixes early on, basically force him to go for Archons, and then Stalkers, and then I follow it up with a whole bunch of Immortals while also going up to Charged Zealots. Now, while I've done a decent job at spending here, right, I really do feel like I could have done more harassment damage. How many workers have I killed? That's 8 workers killed, actually. It's not bad. I really do feel like I probably could have been a little more active with these, though. But then also, I think I could have done a better job at just simply dealing with all of the resources that I'm getting. Now, I do have a couple of shield batteries here near the front, and this is a build and a push here that kind of came unexpected. Now, I realized, hey, wait a second, my opponent send a lot of Stalkers across the map. That probably means he doesn't have a lot, right? So initially, you could see me sending my Phoenixes back into his mineral line there. But then upon realizing that he had quite a few over here, I decided to send them across anyway. Now imagine if earlier I would have warped in 2 additional Zealots, or Stalkers, right? Or imagine I would have been able to just macro this a little bit better while the game was actually happening. I could have definitely squeezed out 2 more Stalkers, or 2 more Zealots for that matter, which would have 100% shut this aggression down. And then I could have left the Phoenixes on the other side of the map to continue harassing. Because at this point, there's a couple of photon cannons, but I could have killed at least half a mineral line worth. And this is the kind of difference that you will notice between like people in Grandmaster League and then the top of the line pro gamers. The decision making has to be super quick. Now I do end up killing a lot of units here with these good old Phoenixes. And by the way, I'm gonna have to pause the game here for just a bit, just because we have already passed the 8-minute mark, which is where SC2 replay stats cuts off the mid game. And while I do like the position that I am in right now, I think I haven't looked at this yet. But I think that SC2 replay stats is gonna tell me that my macro is quite a bit worse on average compared to the Grandmaster opponent. Alright, so let's have a look at the mid game. Make sure you are building units out of your production facilities. If you have enough production facilities, but are not producing units out of them, they are worthless buildings. They do not cut around, or they do not beat around the bush there. Make sure that every time you have a warp cycle up, that you are building units. Now, this is not something you necessarily want to follow every single time. There are definitely moments where you want to save up for a 3rd base, for example, right? And you don't necessarily want to warp in 4 Zealots. But I do think it's a really good rule, as like a general rule of thumb, to just continue warping in your units. You gotta make sure that if you save up resources and you're banking up money, that you're doing so on purpose. You don't really want to do so just because, you're making mistakes, right? You're busy microing on the other side of the map, and therefore you're flooding hundreds of resources. Spending resources is one of the primary objectives in the game. If you have a bunch of unspent resources, there are normally a few causes. You are not producing units out of your production facilities. That is true. You are getting supply blocked too much. Didn't have that. Or you do not have enough unit producing facilities in the process. Make sure you have enough of them to make your current income level. So honestly, for me, it is 100% that very first point there. I should be producing all the time, and one of the ways I can definitely go ahead and do so is by using hotkeys a lot more efficiently. I'm pretty sure that at this point in the game, I have got my Stargates hotkeyed, and I've also got my robotics facility hotkeyed. I put those both on 3. However, obviously warp gates, they are still set to Y on my hotkey group, right? I did not have the gateways, however, hotkeyed. I had them hotkeyed initially, but then I overwrote that hotkey or with the Stargates, rather. I really feel like I should probably move over my gateway hotkey towards number 5, for example, and then allow my my primary unit production facility to go on hotkey 3, the Stargates in this sense. I really need to keep track of that. But if I could go ahead and hit 5 on the keyboard, morph in the warp gates, hit Y to quickly warp in a couple of units, and then continue onwards with the micro of the Phoenixes, I really do feel like I could do a much better job keeping that money low while simultaneously also microing those Phoenixes. I also apparently, and I didn't notice this, I also had too many idle workers. Having idle workers do you no good. Make sure they are all mining. When you are producing facilities, you need one worker to produce multiple buildings. If you have if you have to move your workers from the mineral line, something gets dropped on them. Have them go to another mining base. All right, so I think I did not do my my rallying properly. Now I'm curious. I'm really curious right now about the raw data points. So I produce 19 workers here, whereas the average GM apparently produces 13. I didn't lose too many workers, or I did lose, I guess, more than on average, but I feel like that's at the very least manageable. Idle worker average, yeah, so I did have a couple more seconds right here on idle workers. Significantly more so, actually, than the average GM player. So you can see that I really want to be shift queuing, so that means that as soon as I put down, for example, a Stargate, I want to hold down shift and then right-click it back towards a mineral patch. Very substantial difference there, actually. Right, so I had idle workers there for several seconds. Doesn't sound like a big deal, by the way, but you gotta keep in mind that workers mine for about 1 second or rather for 1 mineral every second that goes by. So I really do feel like I could do a much better job there. Now, here's an interesting one. Average unspent minerals. That's about 50 higher than the average Grandmaster level Protoss. Once again, doesn't sound very significant, but if you would compare it to 186, right, that's like a... You know, I don't know, I don't really want to do the numbers here, but I think it's like a 25% additional amount of minerals that I have on average. That's very significant. I definitely want to be on point with my production there. And if I plan on improving, I should definitely be doing that exact thing. Average time over 30% free supply. 91. Oh my god, that is significant. So that means that I've got over 30% free supply for a lot of time, compared to the average Grandmaster player who's only got 28 seconds there. I think I may actually be making my pylons a little bit too quickly. Like, literally a minute too quickly. See, this is why this tool is really helpful. It shows you a lot of things that the average player a league above you does, and then you can really get a lot of value out of this just by simply comparing it to your own game. Very cool. Well, with that, it is time to watch the rest of this game in its entirety. Now, obviously, this is where Protoss versus Protoss becomes pretty difficult. I am kind of in an awkward position. I've got a lot of Phoenixes that are basically out of energy. I want to send them across the map, but I'm also a little worried that he's going to continue the aggression for a little while longer. One of the ways I could definitely make that easier upon myself is just by having like a couple of stalkers scout around over here, see if there's maybe like a hidden pylon in this area, expand towards the third, and then send my Phoenixes across. I feel like I'm at this point a little bit too indecisive. So I'm sitting on 2 bases here where I could easily expand. I just smashed all of his army. I mean, sure, he's got a couple of stalkers, but there is no way in hell, if I have my Phoenixes across, that he's gonna have these stalkers move across the map as well. It just doesn't make sense. Now, I do see the Dark Shriner coming up. Probably could have even moved into the main base, to be honest there. Now, obviously, that's hard to say with, you know, with the actual game happening itself. But I definitely could have moved over to a third base faster and just in general be quicker. I definitely also want to have my units scouting around over here, checking whether or not there are any hidden pylons. For example, right now there's also that Nexus going up. I should be aware of that right from the get-go. Now, I do think that I fly my units around there quite a bit. Yeah, so I will scout that there is now a Nexus up on the low ground. I'm now also going for the Twilight Council, by the way, but once again, right, I'm going in with the harassment. Look at my resources piling up. Look at my production. I'm not making any probes, not making any you know, upgrades. I'm doing many of those things that I feel like I'm supposed to do, but I'm also slacking on quite a few. So, remember that one star, or that one pylon that I saw over here, or the one structure that I saw building? I just said that I knew that it was a Dark Shrine, and I knew it was. I'm pretty sure I clicked on it for just a brief moment, yet I did not respond to it. That, once again, is also a lack of experience. This is the reason, by the way, and I have a lot of people ask that. Ugh, I end up losing the Nexus even there. But this is the reason why I always recommend, if you plan on improving in StarCraft 2, that you play the game a heck of a lot. I play about a dozen games or so a day, usually. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's kind of what I'm at. But you can still see that I would definitely, if I were to play 30 games a day, right? I just simply can't really play 30 games a day because I obviously have the channels that I'm managing and I obviously want to make content. But if I were to play 30 games a day, like for example, a lot of pro gamers do, a lot of these like really snappy decisions and a lot of this macro in particular will definitely be very rapidly improved. So if you're planning on improving yourself, right? A lot of it is self-analysis and trying to learn how to play the game and watching pro games and learning strategies and following up with the meta and learning maps and all that. But a very large chunk of it is just simply mechanics. If you compare these games to the average grandmaster or like the average, not grandmaster, sorry, the average pro gamer that plays Protoss, you will notice that their control and their, you know, production and their positioning and whatnot is really on point. And that's just because of the fact that they play the game a lot. They've been in every scenario 100 times. They know exactly what's going on and they know how to respond to it as well. Still, I've not scouted that one pylon on the left-hand side of the map. I think I see it in just a second. Well, I mean, I'm close to it. Not quite, though. I'm also still roaming around with the Phoenixes. Let's see if I can definitely do more damage here. So, he sure has got his army positioned at the third base to try and obviously, you know, defend it. But there's no denying that his natural is wide open. It's a little difficult maybe to reach the main base, but there's no denying that I definitely can be a lot more active here with my army. Anyway, now I'm trying to transition towards Zealots, as well as Archons, as well as Immortals. So right now, I once again get into that base. I scout out what's going on. My opponent probably assumes that I'm actually doing a double-pronged harass. I'm not. I do think that it probably would have been a good option. But here we go. This is where Phoenixes really shine. You know, honestly, I was proud of this game, right? And I still am. Because I beat a really strong Protoss player with what essentially is my off race. Yet when I'm looking at these games and I'm analyzing them a little bit more in depth, there is no denying that I've got so much room for improvement. It's relatively minor things that add up really quickly. Overall, I'm playing this well. Overall, I think I'm doing a decent job. But there's no denying that I definitely could be doing a better job, right? Even just sending the probe across the map and denying the natural of him at like the 3-minute mark. That would have been massive. That would have been such a big difference. Anyway, I do feel overall my macro is pretty good. I do like the harassment that I've done. I've killed 30 workers with just my Phoenixes, which is really nice. And obviously I didn't really die. Well, we're gonna add a couple more to that list. Man, Phoenixes are such a pain in the ass to play against. Now I'm lifting all of them up and I'm like, wait a second, he's not here. He's not here. Everyone go! So I'm a little late upon realizing what's going on. That's definitely the lack of observers as well. I needed those a little while ago and then maybe put them in surveillance mode or something along those lines. But regardless, I do now have a lot of Immortals continuously producing. I've got a lot of units here in general. I still have those shield batteries. And just because of the amount of damage I've been able to do throughout the game, and of course also because of the fact that my opponent went for a cannon rush, I've been able to stay ahead here ever since the very beginning of the game. And while I do feel like there's still a lot of room for improvement, I've done a pretty good job at defeating one of the best Protoss players I've ever faced off against. And of course, we're also gonna have a look at the guided improvement focus right here at SC2 Replay Stats. See if maybe I'm still missing out on something. I'm still not macroing properly. I once again got supply blocked. I'm not spending my resources and I still got too many idle workers here continuously. So overall, right, this, like literally all 4 of these points is quite literally SC2 Replay Stats saying to me, Lowko, you need to play more. Like all of these things are fixed if you play the game more. Obviously, you gotta play so. intentionally, right? You gotta make sure that you have a plan for every game and that you're actually working on goals while you're playing and that you're trying to execute things better than you did previously. It's not just about mindlessly like grinding games, obviously, but all of these 100% are fixed by playing more and more games. Let's have a look at the raw data points right here as well. Workers produced. Well, I still made a lot of workers here. Most Grandmaster level players would already be either finished with the game, or I guess they would have already been fully saturated, obviously, because of the early game. It got a little bit awkward. Idle workers average, once again, absolutely significant there. Average unspent minerals, Vespian, also very, very significant here in general. Lost resources, I don't know if that is really that relevant right now to necessarily look at. But there's no denying that the average unspent resources is higher. And while my income is probably also higher, because I obviously went up to a third base, it shouldn't be like twice as high. You know, that doesn't make any sense. I definitely want to make sure that I keep on spending my money. I also ended up being supply blocked there for a significant amount of time. This time around, I had 0%, 30% free supply. So while initially my supply count was all over the place, right, I had a lot of pylons stockpiling supply already. I did not make any of that happen later on during the game. I do feel, though, that these games overall have been solid, but there's definitely no lying that, or no denying that, I can do a much better job. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. A special shout out, of course, to SC2 Replay Stats for sponsoring this video. Really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of the website. If you're interested in checking it out yourself as well, I'll go ahead and post a link to their website down below. A big chunk of their website is just completely free, so basically you can download a little automated tool that I use myself to upload all of your replays automatically. And not only is it going to be a nice little archiving, it will learn a lot more about your games as well. And then there's some paid features to help you improve continuously as well. I do know, by the way, that they apparently offer like features as well to do, I believe, several replays for free every week or every day or so. I'm not entirely sure on the details, but regardless, go ahead and check it out. Give them some clicks, make an account, log in, upload your replays, and see if you can become a better player yourself as well. For now, though, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you once again in the next one.